Hi everyone, I'm Mims and welcome to the channel. Thanks for being here. So today's video is reflecting on the second part of Dropping 78, pardon me. There's a little bit of background noise. You may hear the washer in the background, so just know that. So I'm going to talk about the Suit of Wands and Dropping 78. For anybody who doesn't know, Dropping 78 is a tarot challenge started by Esther of Mindful Tarot, and it comprises the last 78 days of the year from October 15th through December 31st. And what you're doing is you're going through a tarot deck one day at a time, one card at a time, or one card a day. And the acronym stands for Drop Anchor with the Pentacles, Respond with the Wands, Open Up with the Cups, Pierce with the Swords, and then, or Pierce through with the Swords, and then Manifest with the Majors. And that's the order of the cards. So so this second half of October was all about the Pentacles. And today I'm filming this on Tuesday, November the 11th. And so today is the last day of the Wands, and it's Ace through King is the order. And so by the end, or by December the 10th or the 11th, I forget which day, then we'll start with the majors. So that's a little bit about Dropping 78. And of course, with any challenge, you can do it kind of how you'd like. The idea would be that you could, just do it on your own, and you're just looking at a card a day. Esther talks a little bit about the dimensions, and so looking at the meaning of the card, what do you notice in the card, how is your day affected by that card, like how is your day a Three of Wands day, for instance. And then if you're comparing, if you're using a second deck, she calls that like a calibration deck, and it could be a deck or it could be runes if you want to use a different system. And you can even do that if you're using a second tarot deck. You can also do that a little bit differently. Like you could just pull a different card out from a second deck, and even if you pull out, say, the Queen of Wands on the Ten of Pentacles day, you might still look at how those compare and contrast. What I decided to do was use a second deck, but use the same cards each day. So I'm looking, like for today, King of Wands, I'm looking at the King of Wands in two different decks. And the decks that I'm using are the American Renaissance Tarot. I didn't bring the box. I kind of put the box away for right now. But it's by Thea Wirsching and illustrated by Celeste Pille. I'll show some of the cards in a minute. And then the second deck that I'm using as the calibration, or the kind of the compare and contrast deck, I'm using the Pixie's Line Art Tarot, which is a black and white, just the line art from the original Waite deck. It's published by Vieux Monde Press. And one of the reasons that I wanted to use it is I liked having a black and white. I'm familiar with Waite-Smith, or the Waite-Smith, or Smith-Waite. And I also used that same black and white deck last year. Last year was my first year doing it, and I used that as my secondary deck as well. So, first off, I'm just gonna say I've struggled. Last year, I felt like I was pretty on task every day with the writing in my journal, looking at the cards, and even posting to social media. I'm not posting this year. I had actually planned to. I liked the rhythm, even if I didn't necessarily care so much about posting on Instagram, but I liked the rhythm of it. Usually I would write and draw a card in the morning, and then at some point during the day I would pull my phone out, because I don't usually have my phone out with me when I'm journaling and writing in the morning. So I would leave the cards out, and then I would take a photo, and then quick little snapshot with my phone, and then post, and then maybe just write a brief synopsis, maybe not quite what I had thought about in the morning with my journal, but that's what I was doing. And this year I'm struggling. I'm struggling to keep up. I thought about dropping out. I know that there were a couple of people who commented on my last video saying that, you know, that it just didn't feel like a good time of year for them, and so forth. And I do have a Drop-In 78 buddy, and our idea was that we would text each other and so forth. And I really have not been. And in fact, Sunday, because Saturday night, I almost texted her to say, you know what, I think I'm just going to drop out. I just don't think I quite have it with me to do this. And then I thought about it. I'm like, no, I do want to keep doing it. And so what if I get a little behind? So I think Sunday was behind by like 3 cards. Now, one of the things that Esther talks about is she said, you're not behind, just do the card of the day. So, you know, if you miss like all of the wands and you are in the middle of, you know, cups or whatever, just do that card. And I appreciate that approach. And I appreciate that, what I think is kind of a Buddhism approach, right? Being in the moment. Totally get it. But one of the reasons that I wanted to do this Drop-In 78 was to get to know the American Renaissance Tarot better. It is a really wonderful, it's a deck that I had wanted for a couple of years. And so when I got it, I remember just being really excited to have it. So let's just flip through the cards. I'm going to show you the cards now. So these are just the wands, and I'm showing you in the way that I have them done. Yeah, pardon that laundry noise. So one of the things that's intriguing about the American Renaissance Tarot is the fact that it's very much tied in with literature of the U.S. and the history of the U.S. And they're talking this American Renaissance period, they're kind of talking like, you know, depending on what you read, that time period could be what I think of as like 1820-ish to 1870-ish. And so what I love about the deck is that there's a lot in here. Like, this is not just a big chunky guidebook. It's full of end notes and so forth. You know, there's a lot. Okay, I got a couple out of the way. I got a couple. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, now these are, we're getting the Waite-Smith in front, but it's fine. So you can see how, in a lot of ways, even if you don't know what's going on in the cards, it is a similar scene to what's going on in the Rider-Waite, but not enough for me just at first glance to know what's going on. And then a couple of the cards have been renamed. The Knights are missionaries. The pages are pioneers. And in this case, the kings and queens are taken from literature. So first I just want to talk a little bit about wands and struggling. Like I said, I almost dropped out, and then I thought more about it, and I just decided, okay, so I'm a little behind. I'll catch up, and if I get behind again, I'll catch up. And if I decide to drop out later, I can. But this is something that I wanted to do. And one of the things that I liked about this particular, the way it was sort of set up, is that I could take that framework that Esther set up, you know, with the timeline and so forth and a card a day, and make it work for myself. And And it's often easy to begin something. You know, it's easy to say you're going to start a new novel or a new project or whatever. And we really often, or at least I do, get really excited about the beginning. But somewhere in the middle, it gets hard to keep going. Whether it's physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion, spiritual exhaustion, or just exhaustion with what's going on in the world. And maybe a little bit of all of that. And I realized that that is what the lesson of the wands is, at least for me right now. We think about wands, and we often think about, I'm balancing this coffee. When we think about wands, we often think about, and especially with those aces, right? New beginnings. Wands are usually associated with fire. We think about passion, inspiration, and so forth. Passion and inspiration are wonderful for beginnings. It might shake you out of a funk. It might help you to choose a new path. If we look at, you know, like the Two of Cups, or I mean the Two of Wands is very much looking at and maybe brainstorming a new direction, a new way, a new path forward, right? If one, you're starting with the inspiration, two, you might be making a decision about where you're gonna go with that, right? Or even just considering what the possibilities are. And then we get to three. For the longest time, I used to struggle between 2 and 3, like understanding the differences. And I guess when you get to 3, or at least for me, the way I kind of interpret this card, is that if 2 was like brainstorming, 3, you've narrowed down your path. You've decided what the way forward is. And then maybe somewhere in the middle it feels like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can keep going. You've gotten some stability, right? So depending on how you read cards, 4s often can be stability. You know, I always think about like going from a tricycle to a 4-wheel. You can go a little faster. But 4s can also be stagnation. Think about like the cups, you know. So here we've got celebration, but it can also be stagnation. It might be like, oh, this is the path we chose. It doesn't look so good from here as it did maybe in 1 or 2. And then, you know, we have conflict and imbalance, right? Whether the conflict is with yourself, it doesn't always mean that it's with others. But the conflict might be you're deciding, am I going to keep going? Am I going to quit? Do I need to change direction? Do I need to change mode? Do I need to think about another way to approach, right? And again, this is just with the Rider-Waite. And then here you might see a little bit of, you know, I think I remember somebody telling me that for 6 of Wands, they think of like their keyword is like victory. But you're not done. And the further you go, if you're going to change, it's harder to change. Which is why sometimes the steamrolling of going in a particular path, sometimes it takes bravery to stop and pause in the midst of your journey and realizing like, this isn't working. I do need to do something differently. And I think that that's for me what a lot of wands is okay, maybe that's what the lesson is. It might be about going your own way. It might mean, okay, so Drop 'em 78 isn't going to be easy this year. That's fine. Maybe it is going to look a little differently. But you're also in the thick of it. And I decided, no, this is something I want to do. This is something I enjoy. So don't force it. Maybe it is wake up 15 minutes early and just commit to 15 minutes and then catch up later if you need to. Or maybe it does mean that you're just texting. I'm talking to myself now. Maybe it does mean that you're just texting your study buddy every couple of days and saying, hey, how are you doing with, wands or whatever. I also realized that because I'm struggling, I thought that I would be able to read this entire book as part of this. But what I realized is that I'm fine using it right now as a way to get to understand what's going on in the cards. And I think that's definitely one of the differences in this year compared to last year. Last year, the two decks that I was using obviously, I think I said, I was using the Rider-Waite-Smith, or this one, as the comparison deck. But the other deck that I was using was a Rider-Waite-Smith, I hate the term Rider-Waite-Smith clone, but it was the Neoteric Feminine deck from Waite. And the scenes are modern female or feminine energy folks in scenes and backgrounds that look very similar to the Rider-Waite-Smith. They're modern, but the postures and the scenes look pretty similar. So I didn't need a book. I could pull the little cards out and go. Whereas with this one, I am realizing like this is a denser tarot deck. There's a lot in here. But I chose it because I did want to at least get to know the deck a bit better. But I realized that this for me is not going to be a deck study, but it is a chance to get to know it better. And I'm also really excited. Like, sometimes I have to remember that, like, when I buy a book or add a book to my bookshelf, it doesn't mean that I have to read it all right now. But getting to know it a bit better helps me to understand the potential for using it. And I realize that for me, I think this deck is going to be a deck that I will use a lot in reading. I think just, I think this would be a fun deck, like, as a class. And in fact, Thea Wirsching did teach a class last fall. If she offers a class again, I think I'd be up for it. One of the things, though, that I wanted to read, because I thought this was interesting. Wands are given over to the so what she has done is each of the suits, we're looking at literature, and she mentions that. She says, while the major arcana as a collective might be summed up by the word philosophy, the minor arcana have to do with story. Or to borrow some words from high school English, the major arcana represent themes, while the minor arcana reveal plots. And so wands are given over to the ever-popular genre of the adventure novel, with some rounding out by the travel narrative. And then she goes here to talk about how, let's see, in wands, Herman Melville is considered the king of wands. Much of that suit is given over to his epic sea adventure, Moby Dick. And I never liked Moby Dick, so that might also be another part of my struggle. But this also reminds me that this might be kind of a great way to revisit some of those, and also some new books that were new new to me in terms of knowledge, didn't know about them. And then the Queen of Wands is Elizabeth Stoddard. She was as radical and experimental a prose artist in her time as Melville, yet remains largely unappreciated today. So I love the potential that this gives me, and also in understanding how I might use this deck in the future. It's definitely going to be a way for me to dive into some other books that I haven't read, or maybe to revisit some books that I dismissed because I thought I didn't like them. And also to just take a breath, decide what I want, particularly when it's something like this, where I do want to do Drop 'em 78. I do want to keep working with this deck. I do want to see how it goes for the rest of the year, and I want to keep making these videos. So if Wands is all about, we think about fire and inspiration and passion, it also sometimes just takes sheer gumption, as my grandmother would call it, or used to call it, to just keep going, right? Sometimes you just have to dig in. And that's what I'm thinking about right now. And it's a good metaphor for other parts of life, where things sometimes feel like a slog, but not everything is easy. Not everything is simple. But sometimes the things that are worth doing are the things that are hard, are the things that take time and take effort and take commitment. And even if it looks slightly different than you think. Anyway, so those are just some reflections on Wands. And by the time this is posted, we'll have started with the Ace of Cups. Anyway, I hope you're well. I hope you're taking care of yourself. I hope you're finding joy. I hope you are finding ways to take care of the earth and others in a mutual aid sense. And I would love to hear what you think about Drop 'em 78. Are you doing it? Do you have this deck? Are you working on a deck study or something else? Or are you also maybe struggling, being in the middle of some project, whatever the project is? I'd love to hear if you'd like to share, and I hope to see you in another video. Take care.